Welcome in to the Hot Read podcast for Friday, March the 29th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined not by producer JT. He is in the air somewhere heading to, I think, New Jersey right now or something. I don't know where he's going. He's traveling. And so in his stead, I have, don't tell him this, I've upgraded with the other person on the podcast today, and I know he will not admit it, but it is our friend Stoney Keely of the SoBros Network. Stoney, how are you, my friend? Thank you for joining me today.
Doing well. Fourth podcast today. We grind through it, baby. We are here to talk draft. We're here to talk
Right.
Titans. I can't slow down to think about it or I might fall asleep. So we're here, we're wired.
I asked you on Monday or Tuesday, and you said, well, I'm doing a show that morning, and then I'm doing a couple shows in the afternoon, but then I could do yours after. And I said, you don't have to do that. And you're like, no, I want to.
Yeah, I love it.
Which I wouldn't expect from anyone else besides you. You and I sat down and did 4 straight hours of offensive line specific talk last year. So I kind of didn't shock me that much. But yeah, I'll say you're an upgrade over JT just because if I can't make fun of JT when he's not here, when can I make fun of JT?
Fair enough.
When I'm not here, I know he makes fun of me as he should. And so we are talking today about a lot of prospects because I can't have Stoney Keely on the show and not talk about dudes. I know that you and I are talking all the time behind the scenes about guys that you're watching at night, in the morning, in the afternoon, at all hours of the day, just cramming tape, cramming scouting reports. And you know this class in town better than most folks that I know. I could, on one hand, name people I think that know this class as well as you do.
Well, thank you.
And so we're going to go through. Yeah, absolutely. You put in the work and you deserve it. And I'm going to harvest your information today. And so we're going to give our thoughts on the first 4 rounds of this draft class is going to be the general idea for today's episode. The Titans, of course, don't have a 3rd round pick. In my head, I was like, we'll do the first 3 rounds. We'll do day 1 and day 2. And then I realized that we'll just be talking about 2 picks. We're going to the first 4 rounds. We'll do a little drive by the 3rd round and discuss some guys we think would be worth getting a 3rd round pick for. Like, hey, here are the reasons why getting some extra capital is a sexy idea. And then we'll talk about some top of day 3 guys we think the Titans should be targeting. But it's going to be framed not just from a general dudes we like in this range, but a positional, by round positional order of operations, kind of what we think they will do, what we think they may need to do in terms of the needs that they have on this team, and marrying what they need with the best available players at different stages of the draft, because these different position groups have different strengths of depth. They have better strengths at the top of their class. And so it just, there's a lot of calculus that goes into this. And this is, of course, what the Titans front office is sitting around talking about every single day right now for the next month, how they want to approach that. So we're going to talk about it today, as well as some general thoughts on the Titans 2024 season through the prism of the draft, what their ultimate purpose is, what the goal is that they're trying to accomplish. And I don't think that answer is necessarily as simple as it sounds, and how that informs their draft strategy, as well as some philosophical conversations about the draft that I think we will find interesting. So all of that and more on today's show. If you're with us live today, we appreciate you being here. Do us a couple of favors. Number 1, if you are not watching on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, please go and do that right now. Find this live stream on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube channel, and in the comment section there is where you can be a part of today's conversation, like Derek and Chef Ran already are. Chef Ran, appreciate the love, my friend. 440 and BSM killing the game. I wish I could disagree. I would add the SoBros Network to that list, of course. Some fantastic local media outlets. So
listen,
I concur wholeheartedly.
Chef Ran's been in all the shows today, man. He was with me on the Morning Glory show this morning. He was spamming the comments for a football show today, and now here for the Hot Read podcast. Chef Ran's a real one.
How about that? No, I thank you, Chef Ran. You are a real one. So if you want to be a part of the conversation, you can do that on the YouTube channel. And then while you're there, hit subscribe. Very helpful to us. It's free to you. All you have to do is click your finger one time, and it helps us get that number up. We're trying to get to 1,000 on the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page before the draft, and we are on pace for that, but we need more subscribers. So if you're not already, help us out in that regard. Okay. Stoney, let's start here. And like I mentioned a moment ago, no better place to start on this draft class than what the ultimate goal for the Titans is in 2024. And I guess more importantly, how that's best addressed in this draft class, because different teams at different stages of the team building model. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show before, but I wanted to have the conversation with you. Um, some teams are trying to win the Super Bowl, and some teams simply are not. They're trying to get there eventually, and some other teams I think have less simple goals, or should have less simple goals for their upcoming season in particular. Now, of course, the Titans can't look at one season through blinders that keep them from focusing on the long-term future of the franchise. That's what's most important, is that in a couple of seasons, you open up your Super Bowl window and you go and get a ring. But in order to do that, you need a quarterback. And so, as I've said on this show for weeks now, their ultimate goal this season, in my opinion, and you're welcome to disagree, is you have to find out what Will Levis is. And in order to do that, you have to set him up for success, both in terms of protection and weapons at his disposal. And so that being the ultimate goal, with, getting into the playoffs, sneaking into a wild card, competing on a serious level, being a secondary bonus, I guess. Or you could also argue it's just like a result, because if Will Levis is good, that's what's likely to come of this season, right? I think that really does inform the way that they need to approach the draft, especially at the top of the draft where we're focusing on today.
I'm kind of conflicted about the Will Levis conversation, to be honest with you, Easton, because
Good.
on one hand, I feel like they kind of already know what they have in Will Levis, in the sense that I think he's already checked the box that this is a guy that you've at least got to build around and try to make a run at it. Like, let's open the Super Bowl window in 2024. I'm not saying that it's a practical, realistic goal, but I'm saying as a competitor, just that basic level of football, just competing on the field, I think you have to have that mindset of, we've got to do whatever it takes to win. So I think hearing Brian Callahan talk about Will Levis a little bit kind of makes me think like they're already in on this guy. Now, maybe you want to kind of pile that evaluation on top of the goals of being competitive in 2024 and say, well, we've really got to know for sure by the end of this season that Will Levis is the guy. I think they're already inclined to believe that he is. I think there's another goal to this season. Massive roster turnover at this point. I joked on the Unofficial Titans podcast a few weeks ago that it's only going to take 23 new players for the Titans to check all the boxes and rebuild this roster.
Just half the roster. It's not hard.
Yeah. But I think there is an added element to this of losing. When you lose Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill is gone. There doesn't seem to be a market for him. I don't know where he's gone to.
Wait
right
for somebody
now,
to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But a lot of these veteran presences that have been here on this team for years under Mike Vrabel are gone. So I think there's another element to roster building where you kind of have to reestablish a culture, and you have to set a tone for what your locker room is going to be like. So I kind of see it as they're making moves that are solidifying positions of need, when it comes to cornerback, receiver, running back. I like the moves that they've made in free agency so far, but I don't think that this is I don't think they're going into the season just thinking, well, we've just got to figure out what we have in Will Levis, because I think there's, if you see Amy Adams Strunk just firing Mike Vrabel, firing John Robinson, I know that they've mentioned in the media that this is going to be a multi-year rebuild. Maybe they've had those conversations behind closed doors, but the way I would feel about it, I would want to win games just to be sure. So I think they're building a surprisingly competitive roster so far. And I think the main goal, at least, this isn't sourced information, but at least from where I sit, I am of the opinion that this should be a year that's about setting the tone, getting the right culture, tone setter pieces in place, and trying to kickstart this run a little bit early and open this window for a Super Bowl, for a championship, a little bit early.
I agree with a lot of that. Here's how I kind of see quarterbacks proving themselves in the NFL. I think there are really three levels to it. There is proving that you are a guy worthy of getting a shot, right? Being a Sam Howell type last year, where it's like, okay, we'll give him a season. Let's see what happens. And then phase two is proving that you're a guy worthy of building a round. You know, we're going to give this guy a couple years. We're going to structure the way that we approach the cap, the way that we approach off-season roster building, tailored to this guy for the foreseeable medium-term future. And then step 3 is proving that you are a guy that a team can go all in on, give a second very lucrative contract to, a cap limiting contract to, and still compete for Super Bowls, right? Getting into that Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. You know, you could say at the bottom, I would say at the bottom of that is like a Trevor Lawrence type. Some people might think he's just outside of that, but like, you know, those top 8 to 10 guys in the league that get paid and their teams aren't moving them or thinking about moving them because they think they are good enough, you know, like a Dak Prescott to take you to the promised land. And so with Will Levis, I think after his rookie year, he's clearly proven that he's passed the first benchmark there. He's getting his year. He got his year. He's now getting more. And so I think that you could argue he's past that second benchmark of, okay, we don't know if this is a second contract guy. We don't know if he's a can win the Super Bowl even when he's expensive guy. But we are confident he's we'll ride it out as his rookie contract. We're going to see what we got for a couple of years guy. And if that's where he is, great. But if you look at some guys like last year, two big names come to mind for me: Jordan Love, CJ Stroud. Both were at the bottom. They hadn't checked any of those boxes. And by the end of one season, I think, depending on who you ask, and I would be comfortable saying both of them are very nearly, if not having already accomplished all three. They are guys that I really only need to see like another half season of what they've done for me to say, yeah, not only are those guys worth building around now, but they're guys you're going to want to give a second contract to. Because they're that good. They're somebody that you can try to win it all with. And so that's ultimately what I think at least what I think their goal should be this season, is to set Will Levis up to have the most success possible now to try to answer that third question. And I guess your argument could be, well, they have the entirety of his rookie contract to do that. That's true. But with a lot of the contracts they have outside of Will Levis, they really only have 1 or 2 seasons to do that before they've got to kind of shuffle the deck a little bit again. Now, younger talent is going to come in, and they're hoping to hit on that, and that will change the timeline. It's my favorite thing to explain to folks this year with the Titans offseason. As you know, I've been wrestling myself with the notion of teams that win the offseason are almost always losers in the season. And so you get in this vacuum, you know, the vacuum of really sexy moves, and you're actually covering or a fan of the team that's doing the winning of the offseason. And it's impossible to not kind of go against what you said previously and been like, this time's different, guys. I promise. Like, look what they're doing. It makes sense. It's so sexy. It's so cool. And so I've been trying for like a week or two now. Okay, what is the difference? And the biggest there's a couple of things, but the biggest difference to me is that they genuinely have no other options. They have no other obligations, both now or long term, because they had 2 to 3 years of continuous failure with young guys. They have like there are no other meetings on there. They don't have to go to the secretary and say, clear my schedule for the afternoon. The schedule's clear. There's nobody to sign for the next couple of seasons because of how poorly the draft has been managed. And so you have to go and spend money on guys. And then it's all about reasonable, financially responsible decisions when you're structuring the contracts.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. I kind of think that's in somewhere in the conversation collectively. I'm not singling you out for this, but collectively, like we still need to place some sort of importance on winning games and at least being competitive, because if they don't do that at all, then I think we could be singing a different tune next offseason. And I think if the goal is to reset the culture here and, be a feisty team that competes, I think you can still find success in that. And I think I don't think they're going to be good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but I think the moves that they're making so far indicate intelligence, patience, identifying needs and that sort of thing, but they're not like pushing all of their chips into the middle of the table. So I think it's not like let's go all in on 2024, but it's hey, we need some pieces in place to start being competitive, if that makes sense.
Not only do I understand that, I do, but there's a part of me that agrees with it, that empathizes with it. But there's another part of me that is screaming, you have to push back. And for this reason, right? I agree that. So for me, they're both important, right? Winning and establishing what you have in Will Levis are important to me. I think that I know that there is a way for you to do one and let the other be a byproduct of accomplishing the one. And so what I'm worried about, if you gave me a choice of accomplishing one or the other, the reason why I say find out what you have in Levis over winning games, being competitive now, is because you can win games and be competitive to the point of sneaking into the playoffs without finding out what you have in your quarterback. And the biggest glaring example to that for me, and in the process over years, they have eventually, I think, we're at the point where I think a lot of folks who are honest with themselves know who this guy is. Maybe not the team or the fans, but the Miami Dolphins, right? If you look at their books for next season, they are cooked. They're spending like 120. They're due to spend like $120 million in cap space on 4 players, and none of them are named Tua Tagovailoa. He's going to have to get a big boy contract. And so the question is the massive national narrative is going to be, do you pay the guy? Yeah, he's a good ball player. He's clearly a starting NFL quarterback, but is he a guy that can win you a Super Bowl? Is he a tractor or a trailer quarterback? And they have done some winning in the past couple of seasons. I maybe despite Tua is too far because he's not been actively bad, but he's not been the reason they've won some of these games. And there are, if you think that's an imperfect example, there are certainly other examples of teams finding a way to win despite their quarterback or dragging him along. And that's my ultimate fear. If you ask me like what the worst case scenario for the Titans is this season, it's not they lose all their games and they're the number 1 seed. Because if that's the case, and like they're the number 1 pick rather. If that's the case and they're dreadful, I'm pretty confident I will know at the end of that what Will Levis is. The worst case for me is they get to 8-9 wins, but in the process, you've got 2 or 3 interception games for Will Levis where he throws 120 yards and like he's an active detriment, and the defense is really solid, or that the team you played against threw the game away, and you at the end you get into the playoffs, you're one and done, and you have no idea what Will Levis is. That's horrendous to me.
Well, and I think you can look at last year's Titans as an example of this too, to kind of make your point. It's like, what happens if Ryan Tannehill never gets injured and we don't see any Will Levis in 2023? Because I mean,
they're not approaching this offseason the same way. No way.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So I get it. I think that's a good point. I would just caution people not to just completely dismiss the concept of winning games. That's all I'm saying.
Fair. That's absolutely fair. And so let's kind of transition to this next point. Here's where I'm at with the Titans as of right this moment, and I think it's going to be that way heading into the draft. They have 4 positions that are glaring needs. They have needs at many positions right now, but they're it's largely it would be nice to it'd be nice for them to have another safety. It'd be nice for them to have some depth at receiver, some younger players at receiver. Another running back certainly would not hurt. A backup tight end would not hurt. But the positions where they have to get at least one, and in most of these cases, multiple starting players, is offensive line, defensive line, edge, and linebacker. Those are the 4 flashing red lights on the dashboard for this team right now. And so knowing that, and I'm pretty confident there's still going to be big needs going into the draft. I don't think that next month of free agency is going to change that all that much. How do you rank those priorities? Again, offensive and defensive line, edge, and linebacker heading into this draft, just in general, agnostic of where they're picking and when. What is most important for them? If they don't come out of the draft having addressed this position in a meaningful way, it's a failure to you.
It's got to be the offensive line for me, and specifically both of the tackle spots, because I still think this team was pretty competitive in 2023, despite having maybe the worst offensive line I've ever seen this organization have. I mean, it's just atrocious. And to think that they were still in some of those games, not all of them, but in some of them, was pretty telling to me that, man, if you just have mediocre protection, it could have unlocked a lot more of that offense, and we could be singing a completely different tune here in March of 2024. So I think it is of paramount importance to protect Will Levis. I think Jim Harbaugh was spitting some facts about the offensive line
I was going to bring it up. I'm glad you did.
Earlier this week, about how it's the one position group that you absolutely need to for everything else to flow through it pretty much. So I think it's got to be of the highest priority. I don't really care what they do in free agency between now and the draft. I think you have to have bookend tackles come out of this draft class. You've got to have 2 young guys
You
that
want both out of the okay.
I want both of them. Yeah, I jotted down left tackle and right tackle. I want them both because I do think this is a really deep offensive tackle class, and you can get both.
I would love both too. I'm not banking on it personally, but I'd love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult considering they, like you said, they need an edge rusher pretty badly. They need an inside linebacker, defensive line help, and then the luxury picks of wide receiver depth, which I don't know that you would even call luxury depth, because you think about the fact that we don't know what Ridley's going to be, and DeAndre Hopkins is only in town for 1 more year for sure. It may be a more pressing need than I'm giving it credit for, but they only have so many picks, and to need 2 guys, I don't know. I think there are some intriguing developmental prospects that they can get on day 3 at right tackle, but it is priority number 1 in my book.
Well, for me, I mean, applying my belief that the number 1 goal for them this season needs to be finding out what Will Levis is. It obviously is offensive line as well, and it's the tackle position because, I had a lot of friends when it became a thing on the internet the other day. Oh, Vegas 5.5 wins for the Titans. That's the win total right now. And folks come to me, can you believe this? And my answer is, first of all, yes, I can believe it.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly believable. And second of all, you can be mad at this all you want. Who's playing tackle on either side of the line? Do you know? I'm not familiar with who they are.
I mean,
and so as long as Vegas doesn't know either, what are they supposed to do? Assume they're going to find 2 great tackles in the next 3 months? You hope so, but we don't know.
Yeah, Brian Callahan's talking about, we're going to put NPF and Jalen Duncan out there at right tackle. I don't know.
That inspires confidence.
I still say give these guys some time, but I think they should be in reserve roles to be developed.
Yeah.
I don't know that it inspires confidence if you're counting on one of those guys to be your starting right tackle. And then, we're just gonna like glaze over that who is the left tackle? Like literally, who is the left tackle right now? I don't know.
And of course, the rebuttal when you mention that to folks is, well, yeah, but Bill Callahan's on the team now. Yes, he is. That's good, and that is helpful. And if anyone is going to get that level of play out of an MPF or a Jalen Duncan, he's your man. However, 2 things. One, let's not jump the shark on the Bill Callahan miracle worker deal. Like I really am loathing the point we're going to get to where I have to start hating on Bill Callahan by proxy because the narrative is so overblown, where I tell folks, like, I need you to have less faith in this man that I actually have an immense amount of faith in. But also, even if he gets that out of them, folks think it's going to be this year? Like, you think it's going to be before week 10 that you're getting decent offensive tackle play from either of these players? Like, again, not a miracle worker. Maybe he gets that out of them, but they're developmental because they need developing on the field with live reps. That takes a while. So he may get the best out of them ultimately as players, but if you're, again, this year, the win total thing, you're not banking on either of those guys, even if Bill Callahan fixes them to be a part of that equation. You just aren't.
Yeah.
The reason why I bring those things up, and this transitions us to another topic regarding, you mentioned the luxury picks with wide receivers, right? And you said you wouldn't even necessarily categorize it as a luxury pick. And a lot has been made in the past couple of days. The LSU Pro Day, Titans are there. They meet with Malik Neighbors, a top 3 receiver in this class. And for most folks, he is number 1 or number 2. Incredible talent. And if he is there at 7, most folks are going to be clamoring for Malik Neighbors, I think, agnostic of who else is there. First of all, the odds of him being there at 7 still, I don't think, are all that high. But regardless of whether or not they take him or a different receiver at 7, or they go offensive line, it's still somewhat of a split argument. Calvin Ridley was in the building for 48 to 72 hours, and people were all kumbaya in agreement of, okay, it's offensive line at 7. And then naturally it took three or 4 moons to pass for us to be like, actually, hear me out. More fireworks and less boring picks. And so, like, not shocking. But here's my ultimate point to you, Stoney. I want to see if you agree with this. I agree that both line and wide receiver are still big needs. But when it comes to players you get in the first round, not only are they the more talented players, they're the more ready players, right? They're the guys that you're going to plug in play in their first season. You're going to find better players in the later rounds scattered that are end up being better players than some of the hits in the first round. But the difference between them pretty universally is going to be the later round guys are going to become hits down the road. They're going to develop into what they can be. These first round guys are not only the highest talents, but they are the ready-made talents, the plug and play, IKEA out the box, assembly required. And so with that in mind, I don't see why folks aren't, again, if you're focused on 2024, why is it not pretty unanimous that you need the ready-made lineman because you've got nothing right now? When the argument for receiver is, well, you've got two guys now, but a year, 2 years from now, max, you're going to need another guy. That sounds perfect to me to go and get a really high upside, talented receiver in round 2 or round 3 that can sit behind them and develop, as opposed to the folks that want to go. You ask, why Neighbors in the first round? Well, because this is a deep tackle class. Go get Kieran Amagaji, go get Kingsley Suamate, go get Patrick Paul in the second round. That's all fine and good, but my response to them is, I hope you're ready to sit and wait a year for this team to start to figure it out and to work out, because that's what you're signing up for when you do that.
Yeah, I mean, unless you think John Ojukwu can be your left tackle.
Are you saying you that's where you're at right now?
No, that is not where I'm at. I am
okay. I just wanted to make sure.
I am 100% on left tackle. And whether that's Joe Alt, whether that's Olu Fashanu, or even if it's JC Latham and they think
we're going to get to him in a minute. Don't you worry.
Left tackle, I am 100% get the offensive tackle in the first round. But I think that from what we've heard from Brian Callahan, I think they could be leaning towards the wide receiver.
I agree.
The whole thing about I want the guy that scores touchdowns, all things being equal, comes to mind. I just don't know.
Does that change? Does it change your perception of their timeline if and when they do that? Like they go receiver, does that then shift in your head? Okay, cool, good. Like I don't think either of us are going to be upset with Malik Neighbors. Get him out of here. Great, awesome. But it changes like the compete in 2024 mentality for me completely.
It does. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, well, everything I said about winning games in 2024, just right out the window with that pick.
It's exciting in a different way now.
Yeah, exactly. So I get the vision for it, but man, you got to have the left tackle, in my opinion.
I agree. And again, there is a very convincing, tempting. There are two wolves inside of you, and one of them is howling a gorgeous melody of receiver at 7. Even though I know the wise wolf inside me is saying you must resist. But I'm with you that I think it has to be tackle if 2024 is your idea. And here's my last point on this: if they convey that like they're on a more 2-3 year plan, that's all fine and good for me. But by the picks that they make, they go receiver and they address tackle later. But that then forces me to ask some questions about some of the contracts they've signed, some of the guys they brought on for like extremely short term, like that. I'm not sure if that draft strategy marries perfectly in my head with the way that they've attacked their free agency strategy. Because in free agency, it makes it sound a whole lot like they like to jumpstart the competitiveness of this team.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like earlier, like some of the free agent moves kind of make me think that they're in their mind somewhere is we've got to at least try in 2024.
Right. I agree. Okay. We promised prospects today and we're halfway through. So let's spend the last half on prospects. Let's talk about some dudes and perfect transition. Let's just go right to the offensive line in the first round, since that's where you and I have our collective brain trust focused right now. Now, when we say offensive line in the first round, I think I can speak for you in saying we're not necessarily saying 7 has to, trading back is still a scenario in which tackle can and will be addressed for this team, whether you're getting a tackle at 7 or 11 or 12, whatever that is. So if they get a tackle at 7, Stoney, is there a scenario in which them taking a tackle not named Joseph Alt. I'm assuming his name's Joseph. I don't know. Maybe he's just Joe, but for
Could be.
effect, Joseph Alt, where you're not really scratching your head.
Repeat that question for me. Is there a scenario
in which Joe is not the pick at 7 and he is on the board where you aren't left really scratching your head over that decision?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's tough. I would be happy with Roma Dunze. There's another layer of this conversation that we haven't even talked about that I'm going to get beat up for this. I'm going to be bullied, but
I love Roma Dunze.
Speaking my truth. I'm not as high on Malik Neighbors as everybody else is. He's my wide receiver 3, and I don't really think he's a blue chip prospect the way that some people do. So depending on difference in talking about goals and what 2024 in the future holds and just building this roster to be the best that it can be. Like I would be okay with Roma Dunze, and I would get the vision if they were to go with wide receiver. It wouldn't be my first choice, but I would get it if they went with Roma Dunze. If they went with one of the other tackles, I can see it because, man, the top of this class is really pick your flavor with the offensive tackles. I think Joe Alt's probably the most complete, but I think Fashanu's probably the better pass protector. I think JC Latham's probably the most powerful. I think Fuanga is probably the most violent. So I could get that. I mean, the only thing that they're going to do at 7 that's really going to have me scratching my head is if they take like Jackson Powers Johnson over Joe Alt with Joe Alt on the board.
Yeah.
Or that sort of
Graham
thing.
Barton, come on down. Yeah.
Graham Barton, come on down. Let's Brock Bowers, I still would be kind of like, oh, really?
And folks have really erased that possibility. And I'm glad that they have. Like, when was the last time you heard anybody talk about Bowers at 7? Feels like it's been months now.
Yeah.
I'm glad that is gone, but there is a part of me that's still worried about that. Let me backtrack just a hair because Zach, if this is the way that this conversation came across, I want to clarify. Zach saying, I'm not sure how Neighbors equals not worried about competing or can't compete, however you want to frame it. That's not what I was trying to say. So if that's how it came across, I guess I didn't articulate it well. My point is that, and this isn't even just a Neighbors take. It's just an agnostic positional take, offensive line versus receiver. If the first round pick is not tackle, I don't have an issue with that. And I'm not saying they can't be a competitive team soon. To me, that conveys this front office, this coaching staff, their plan is less focused on this year and more focused on the next 2 to 3. Because again, you can have all the great receivers you want. You're not going to be a truly competitive team without any tackles.
Yeah, I mean, it just changes the way I think it changes the lens through which this staff views the 2024 season is all.
Yes, I agree. And again, that's not to say that they could. If you told me they drafted Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors at 7 and still managed to sneak into the playoffs, and it was they draft a tackle in round 2 and or round 3, and they find a serviceable vet, and they scrap it together. And there are some games that are truly a disaster, but the rest of the elevated roster, carries a relatively bad and young offensive line to 9-10 wins. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But that's not as competitive. That's a less straightforward way to being competitive now to me than going hard on the offensive line performance now. Is that fair? I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with it.
Okay. So the tackles in the first round, let's say Joe Alt is not there because, you mentioned Jim Harbaugh, the Chargers head coach, talking about the offensive line very eloquently at the owners' meetings. And I don't think it would shock anybody if at 5 they went with the tackle, whether it's Joe Alt or I know Mike Herndon yesterday floated the idea of, well, JC Latham really does seem to fit the Jim Harbaugh style of guy. And, maybe he's the first tackle off the board and shocks everybody at 5. I would not criticize that move necessarily if they think that's their guy. But if at 7 Alt is not there, and for the Titans it is a Latham or it is a Fuaga or it is a Fashanu, who's the guy, if I'm telling you Alt is gone, that you're then pounding the table in that 10-minute stretch between 5 and 7, get this guy if it's a tackle, who's the guy for you? Or is it kind of a coin flip and you're not sure who it is.
It's still Fashanu for me. I think people are way overthinking. Like, the tape is still the tape, and we watched the tape months ago, and it was, the arguably the best offensive tackle in this class. Like, just can't miss, best pass protector, some inconsistencies in his run blocking, but this guy, this is 1A and 1B with Joe Alt, and now the tape is still the same, but because he goes to the combine and, I guess his hands are small all of a sudden, or, he's bombing interviews or something, the narrative completely changes. And I've seen him like slide down into near 20 in the mock drafts. And I'm just like,
who would do that, man? That's crazy.
What has happened? You did it. You had him at 18, right? Yeah. That's where I saw it. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? We're way overthinking this. This is still the tape being your Northern Star,
right? Your guide.
This is a really good offensive tackle. So I'm going to be stoked, even if Joe Alt is off the board, if they end up with Fashanu.
I'm with you. And even when I put him at 18 in that mock draft, I kind of immediately parsed it by saying I'd be kind of surprised if this happened. My ultimate point was that one of these top 6 tackles is going to fall farther than we think, just because, like, I think again, we always tend to overestimate the number of a certain position going in the first round by 1. And there are great tackles in this class, but not every team needs a tackle. And so I think somebody is going to get one of these awesome top tackles at like 20, 22, 24. And folks are going to be like, how did they do that? Whether or not it's Fashanu, I don't know. But Stoney, I don't think you would debate that reading the tea leaves, like just the national scuttlebutt, the vibe, the zeitgeist, if you will, around the NFL, there's not a lot of buzz for Ola Fashanu. And I don't know why. Again, like you say, you watch the tape and it's like the physical profile, the athletic profile, what he did on tape. It's all there. Besides small hands, that again is like Duke Manyweather, I think, came out a couple weeks ago and he's like, hey, I don't care. That does not matter.
Yeah.
But what does he know, right?
I never noticed small hands being an issue on the tape.
If folks will say like grip strength, okay, sure, fine. But watch the tape. When you watch Ola Fashanu, were you like, man, if he could just hold on to that guy a little bit stronger? I'm not ever seeing that.
I didn't jot it down once.
So I don't know why that is. Can we, before we move on from the tackle position, can we talk about JC Latham a little bit? And he's been put through the ringer in local Nashville media the past week. I know that you're doing a little your Friday tape article over at Stacking the Inbox is on him this week, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
And so he's fresh on your mind.
Yeah.
Can you just lay out the case for this guy? Maybe defend this guy a little bit and why you think he is one of the top tackles in this class?
Oh yeah, I can do that pretty easily. Everything about him is strong first step, strong burst out of his stance, strong hands. Aggressive mentality. He looks to just plop down on dudes whenever he's engaged with the blocks. I like the way he's bendy. He's springy. He bends at the elbows instead of extending his arms in blocks. He bends at the knees instead of bending at the hips. Like, technically refined. He's big, thick, built. Everything about him is strong. It's powerful. I think he's one of those guys that's just built in a manner that he probably doesn't look like he's moving as quickly as he actually is. But I think from a functional standpoint, he gets the job done. I mean, we can get into the nuance. I love the way he moves his hips to kind of mirror the core of the defender so that he's never in a position where he's having to react and turn and reach or letting the guy get away from him. I think he's got a really savvy, polished game. There are times that it looks like maybe he relies on his raw power to win the one-on-one matchup. And so maybe his feet aren't set right off the bat to establish his base. A little late to drop the anchor sometimes, but he's so damn big and strong that it doesn't matter. And maybe you can say that doesn't translate to the NFL, but it's also not something that you see consistently on his tape. It's just like a few times a game, you're like, should have got that anchor dropped a little bit sooner on that one. But I think he's a pretty complete prospect. And my ultimate takeaway from watching as many games on him as I have is that if he played left tackle, we wouldn't even be having these conversations of where he'd be drafted at all. He would be comfortably top 10 pick, maybe even taken before Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu.
Wow. Well, I love that you mentioned.
I like him a lot.
No, I like him too. I love that you mentioned sometimes maybe it's built in a way that makes him look like he's not moving as fast as he. It's like when they implode a building and it looks like it's
Yeah.
falling in slow motion because it's just so big. So you obviously you let me play. If you're on the stand, I'll be the defendant here, or the be the prosecution rather. Um, uh, you say that he's big. We know this, right? I can Google how tall and heavy and strong this guy is. It's very evident. The movement skills, some people will say, well, at that size, just I'm not sure. He didn't do the athletic testing. God forbid you don't do the athletic testing. That
Mm-hmm.
must mean he's not a very good athlete. Do you see not a very good athlete on the tape for JC Latham?
No, not at all, and that's what's so surprising about the analytics community or whoever's come out and said, like,
I'm not even sure we should give it the analytics title. I'm not sure there's a lot of analytics going on there.
I can't remember who it was. I can't remember the guy's name. I don't follow him, but
Okay.
he works in analytics. One of the national guys that came out and was just like, "Oh, this is deeply unsettling. This is highly disturbing." I'm like, "Have you not watched?" I'm trying to keep it clean for the Hot Read podcast. I'm trying
There you
not
go.
to curse on this
Yeah,
show.
we
I
appreciate that here. Yeah.
respect your brand, but like, have you not watched any freaking tape on this guy whatsoever? Like, are you
The answer
just
is no, obviously.
did this guy, like, just the first time he ever heard JC Latham's name was in the tweet saying that JC Latham didn't do the athletic testing? Like, where have we been, buddy? Like, where were these concerns throughout the season? I just I don't know, man. There's a myriad of reasons that he could have opted out of doing the testing. There were a number of other prospects that did it, and I don't see people whining about them. So what is like where is this even coming from? I that's what I'm having the hardest time just
Mhm.
fathoming. Why did we just wake up one morning and like, oh my gosh, wait a second. There's a huge issue with JC Latham not doing the athletic testing.
I mean,
Sorry,
honestly,
I'm ranting, but
I'll tell you where it's coming from. Folks watched JC Latham once. He played against Michigan one time a couple months ago, and it didn't go
mhm,
awesome necessarily for him. So there were some priors, deeply seated, and then he
man.
became a top 3 tackle. And then you look for anything, and then not testing. Okay, well, there priors confirmed. That's what it is.
Yeah, in the Michigan game, it's tricky too because there were some things that
It's not even that bad.
it,
It's been overblown in people's minds.
it's the classic. I don't want to be that guy that, like, oh, you don't know what you're watching, but he got blamed for some stuff that wasn't really his fault on some
Sure.
plays that looked really bad.
Mhm.
And I think if you watch it back, watch it over and over in slow motion, and you can see it like, oh, that's probably not really 100% on JC Latham at this
Right.
point.
Okay. Let's move on for the sake of time. We talked tackle at 7. We talked receiver at 7. You and I disagree on this. You have told me in the past week that there is at least one defender in this class the Titans could theoretically take at 7. You
Mm-hmm.
would have no issue with.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this person?
It's Dallas Turner. I love the edge rusher. I think when you start like connecting dots, I think there's a pretty easy path to the Titans taking Dallas Turner. I think there's a major drop off after the first round in the edge class.
Sure.
Whereas you look at these other needs, offensive tackle, wide receiver, theoretically, um, you could put off tackle until 38. You could put off wide receiver until day 3 and still get a guy that's going to contribute. And if you take Dallas Turner, to me, you get the best guy in the class. You check off a huge need, and you don't have to worry about really gambling on a guy that you hope you can develop.
Uh, Listen, here's why I disagree on Dallas Turner, and I think he's a good prospect. I would draft him in the first round. He's not a top 10 draft pick to me. He's a guy that I would take at 15. I'd take him at 16. I
Okay.
think he's good. I think he's solidly a red chip player, but I do not think he's a blue chip player. And I don't see any. I think mathematically there is no way, based on who I consider a blue chip player in this class, for the Titans not to have at least one blue chip option at 7. So for me, like the checklist becomes: would Dallas Turner satisfy? Uh, would Dallas Turner satisfy taking the best available player? The answer to me is no. Okay, would Dallas Turner satisfy the Titans' need to accomplish the number 1 goal this season of figuring out what Will Levis is? The answer is no. Would Dallas Turner satisfy a need for the Titans? 100%. Yes, they really could use an edge player like him. So like it's a 1 out of 3 thing for me, and I don't see a world again. in a vacuum, Dallas Turner, a Tennessee Titan, not a bad thing at all. I don't think he's a bad player. I think the opportunity cost is too great. Is there any other defender where you're like, you're still on the Johnny Newton train?
I do love Johnny Newton, but
I know you do, but at 7?
No, not at 7.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I will also add that Dallas Turner would be another one of those picks that they would make, and I'd be like, oh, okay, so they're just putting the spare on right now. We're broke down. We're broke down on the side of the road, and they're just putting the spare on the tire, or they're putting the spare tire on the car for 2024.
Right. This tire is rated for 50 miles. We're not finishing the road trip on this bad boy. We're hitting the shop again before we're done. Okay, so let's move on from the first round, because that's very chalky. You've heard that talked about. If you've made it with us on today's episode of the 50th minute, you're here for the good stuff, because now we're gonna just throw out some guys and talk some shop on second round players. The Titans are at 38. Stoney, would you be very pleased, as pleased as I am, if they were to trade back from 38 and acquire more day 2 capital? Because I would if I could name one thing that happens in this draft class, that's what I would dictate: is you must move back and get 2 picks in the top 100, not just 38 and then wait till 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely be on board with that, because I think when you pair up their needs with what's going to be available, what the market is dictating at 38, man, I don't know. Like, they need a linebacker. 38 is too rich for any of these linebackers for me. But if you
think so,
fly back to,
and you're not a huge Edgerrin fan.
No,
you're not.
I'm not. He's linebacker 4 for me. I think Edgerrin Cooper is one of those guys that is like the cardio champ of the SEC. Like, he runs around a lot, and it amounts to nothing. I don't mean to be so harsh on the guy, but like, some of the first round hype for Edgerrin Cooper, I just didn't see it. And when I watched him, I watched him and thought, that's Kenneth Murray. That's Kenneth Murray.
No, so they certainly don't need another one of those, right?
Yeah. So
you have what? Peyton Wilson above him, Junior Colson above him.
Peyton Wilson and Junior Colson are the 2 linebackers that I would feel comfortable drafting and expecting them to be. I don't think they would be like the best linebackers in the world week 1, but I would have the most faith in those 2 guys that they could come in and kind of command a starting job throughout the season. Yeah. And then I like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. too quite a bit as well. I think those are the top 4. I still like Edgerrin Cooper. I don't mean for it to sound like I'm just taking a big old dump all over the guy.
If Edgerrin Cooper's family is watching, Stoney Keely is putting a pox on your house. He's wishing all bad things to you.
I love the traits. I think he's a great downhill player. Whenever he has his sights set on a target, he can just, see ball, get ball, which is, again, like what everybody is saying about Kenneth Murray. But I think the traits are there. If you can teach him how to play linebacker, I think you got a good player. But I think Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, those 3 guys kind of come ready-made to play the position from the neck up.
But if I'm not mistaken, you did start all this by saying you don't necessarily think 38 is a good idea for any of these guys. Too rich for your blood.
No, it's too rich for my blood, because I think there's going to be a pretty good edge rusher there at 38, depending on how things go. Right. I think there's some pretty good defensive linemen there. And then, I mean, even if they wanted to double up on tackle with the first couple of picks, you could do that and still get a difference maker. And I don't know. I feel pretty good, like I said, about Colson and Wilson, but I don't know, even with those 2, that they're going to be real difference makers at the NFL level.
Well, but then there lies the problem with Stoney, because they have set themselves up with such a massive need at this position. Now, it's not the highest, not even close to the highest in terms of a positional, the totem pole of positional need. You can, if you had to pick a position to not be great at, linebacker would be one you'd consider. But that doesn't. Folks hear that and they say, "Oh, then you don't need linebackers." No. You need linebackers. Yeah. Defenses are going to exploit what the Titans have at linebacker unless they make some serious changes. Like, we're already there. It's going to be every week. Teams are going to do that, and then we're going to be talking on Sunday and Monday about how the Titans have a real soft spot in the middle of their defense. But you can get away with that more than nobody can cover. You can get away with that more than you can't affect the quarterback at all.
Yeah.
So if they don't go linebacker with one of those, obviously not the first pick, but with their second pick, and they don't have any more day 2 capital, they're waiting till day 3 in the hundreds to get a guy. Like, do you see not to skip ahead in our process here, do you see other guys in this linebacker draft class that, again, maybe not difference makers, not a top 40 pick, but could you plug in a Cedric Gray out of North Carolina, who I had going to the Titans in a mock, a decent coverage player, somebody that's going to provide that yin to Kenneth Murray's yang in terms of being the green dot, being the guy that you can rely to step back into coverage? Are there guys later in this draft class they can get to be that guy now?
Well, I don't know that they're going to have a choice.
Sure.
If they,
sure. I mean, Dr.
wait-
Gibby is their choice. That's their option.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are guys with traits that you like. I haven't dug into the Jordan McGee tape just yet, but I know Zach is super high on him.
Okay.
Wrote about him on Stacking the Inbox. I saw his name pop up when Jim Nagy tweeted about him. I thought the Senior Bowl was sniffing around. So my wife was out of town one Friday night. Temple was playing SMU, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have a couple beers. And I'm gonna watch this linebacker that the Senior Bowl sniffing around. I thought, from what you can tell on a game broadcast, I thought, this guy's pretty good. And then he just never got the Senior Bowl invite for whatever reason. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what it was, but I know Zach is super high on him, and he's a guy that I am excited to watch. As for who I have scouted, and I think this linebacker class, if you're waiting until day 3 to find a green dot, you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
Right.
I like Cedric Gray. Cedric Gray is an athletic guy. He had a really good Senior Bowl game. I like Nathaniel Watson. I think he has
Mississippi State player. Yep.
The traits you're looking for from the neck up, like knows how to play linebacker, may have some athletic limitations. There's a kid at Georgia State, John Trey Hunter, that is pretty fast, pretty twitchy, but a little undersized. I mean, I've gotten to the option, Easton, where like I'm watching the Houston Cougars all 22 defense, and I'm seeing them switch Nelson Caesar in between inside linebacker and out wide. And I'm like, shoot, maybe you could take a guy like that and put him at middle linebacker and teach him how to play the position. But to quote Jake in the comments here, short answer, no.
Yeah, I agree. And that is, if you asked me, not what's most important, but if you had to give me like one guess as to what are they just not going to get fixed, linebacker is easily my choice. I don't see a great path to them actually. I think this is going to be a hole for them no matter how you slice it.
Yeah. I should mention Trevin Wallace too. I wrote his name down too. He's a traitsy guy. I think he was probably the best of the bunch at the Senior Bowl this year. And I think he will be, I don't know if teams like start thinking about linebacker too much and they wake up and realize, man, this is a bad class. Maybe he goes earlier than we're expecting. But I think he would be a pretty decent option if you're just rolling the dice on a guy on day 3 and hoping for the best.
Okay, so let's talk about more ideal picks at 38. And there are a handful of guys that the Titans could use in terms of positional need, and they would be really nice value there. Like if you look at defensive line, both edge players and interior players, you've got Chris Braswell, edge at Alabama. Braden Fisk is a big name in this draft season, defensive lineman out of Florida State. Chop Robinson could be there. Either of the Robinson edge guys, Chop or Darius from Penn State and Missouri, respectively. Is there a guy in particular where you're like, if he's there, bring him to me, give me this guy in terms of defensive lineman?
Yeah, Darius Robinson. I don't know how you view him. Some people
I've got him as, I had him in the first round mock I did yesterday or 2 days ago.
And if you watch the Missouri tape, they lined him up inside quite a bit, and to me, he looks like Danico Autry. Like he's a guy you could draft, and he's going to check that box for you.
Yep.
I think if you're, there's not a lot of tape of him really out wide, just, pinning his ears back and going after the passer a whole lot. But he did it at the Senior Bowl, did it really well.
But he doesn't win with speed. He's going to win with the power. He's so strong.
And length, like he's a pretty powerful, like foot drive, relentless kind of pass rusher. I mean, a lot like Danico Autry. So
yes,
I think he checks a major box for you. I've got him listed among the edge rushers because I think that's where teams will be salivating over his skill set and potential. I've got him number 2 behind Dallas Turner among the edge rushers.
You really don't think he's going to be there? Not at all.
Yeah, I hope he slides, because that would be the ideal draft for me. Would be Joe Alt at 7, Darius Robinson at 38. But I would be happy with Chris Braswell as well. I think Chris Braswell.
Okay, so yes, I was about to say I co-sign either of those options. I like Braswell a lot.
Braswell's really underrated. He's one of those guys that I don't think he's like elite in any one particular thing, but every time you look up, he's winning a rep. And that was the case at the Senior Bowl. He's like, this dude's been winning reps all week and nobody's talking about him just because that's Chris Braswell. That's what Chris Braswell does.
You listen to this show, Stoney, so you know, like, a running thing for me, one of my biggest draft theories is that when you have two guys that played the same position at the same school in the same draft class, the guy that people like less is always overlooked. He's always undervalued. And we have like 4 or 5 or 6 examples, high profile examples of that in this draft class, which makes it really fun because I mention it like every show. But I think Chris Braswell he's the little brother of that Alabama tandem of edge rushers that is being overlooked because he absolutely is a day one impact player who I think could develop into a monster of an edge rusher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I like Marshawn Nealon a lot too, but 38's way too early for him.
He's more developmental, right? I mean, like the length is ridiculous. He played at a smaller school at Western Michigan. Maybe not. I say not super raw, but like he's not as polished a player as a Braswell or a Robinson. You don't think, right?
Yeah, and it's the level of competition concerns are pretty easy to make.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a guy that can really run down the middle of an offensive tackle, and that's a pretty impressive thing. Curious about how that's going to look in the NFL with bigger, faster, stronger offensive tackles, but man, I don't know. Like, to me, I look at the class and I'm like, if you don't get somebody at 7 or at 38 and you're still needing an impact player, it's a lot of developmental guys. I don't like Braylon Trice all that much. I don't like Jonah Ellis all that much.
Yep.
They're very like traditional, like 4-3 defensive end types, if you ask me. Like, just the guys that want to just line up and be the hammer kind of deal. But I don't see a lot of bend or flexibility in either of the guys. And I don't know, like, I just, in this day and age, like, give me a guy that can beat you in a bunch of different ways.
I agree completely. So we've already both mentioned it would be awfully nice if they could get another pick in the day 2 range, a 3rd round pick if they were to trade back in the 2nd. Who are some 3rd round ish projected guys that you would, if you were to go to the Titans staff and that you were presenting today on why we need a 3rd round pick? These are the guys at the top of your bulletin board. I personally think if you're looking at the wide receiver position, I really like the 1st round receiver crop, and I really like the value 3rd round, 4th round receiver crop. And I am constantly in a state of mental anguish over the 2nd round crop of guys because they all have a 1 or 2 really big things that scare me to death. And I just don't know about that at 38. There are a handful of guys in this range. Like, you've got, I'm trying to pull it up here. Javon Baker out of UCF is growing on me. The more I look into him, I like him a lot. And he's going to be like a day 2 guy for sure. I would imagine he's there in the 3rd. And then you got a couple of guys that we've talked a lot about, like Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall, Jermaine Burton out of Alabama, who's a really talented guy who's not being talked about much at all. I think maybe for some good reasons, but
there's some character concerns.
By the way, I told you this last night. I think he is a Pittsburgh Steeler. He screams Pittsburgh Steeler to me, like a very crazy talented player that is a little bit inconsistent and has some real character red flags. Day 2 wide receiver. That's got Mike Tomlin written all over it, man. So I'm going ahead and phoning that one in. Jalen Polk out of Washington. Speaking of the theory of guys that are number 2 or 3 fiddle on their team in the same draft class, like both of the Washington receivers, Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, sign me up for either of those guys. Who in the 3rd round for receiver are you really a fan of?
Man, I don't know what to really make of Ricky Pearsall's draft stock because I watch his tape. I'm going to tell you this, and he's
so good.
People are probably going to, like, you're never going to have me back on the show, but I've got Pearsall. Pearsall's around my top 30 overall. I love him.
So he's wide receiver what? Is he like wide receiver 6 for you? 7?
I think he's wide receiver 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I'd have to double check, but he's
crazy for that. I think he's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I think he's, people kind of miscast him as a slot guy, but Pretty Ricky can hang outside. He didn't do it too often, but really good athlete, really good mover. I love the way that he he really sells his release with his entire body. I'm talking like from the feet to the hands to the shoulders to his head, the head whip, just like he can break himself open at the line of scrimmage before anybody even makes contact with him. I think he's really good craftsman in that regard. He also had a really good Senior Bowl week. Everybody was kind of talking about Ladd McConkey, but Ricky Pearsall quietly bowed out of practice on Thursday as well. And I think it's indicative of, scouts, coaches, whoever looking at him and saying, "Hey man, you ain't got to do this anymore. We're good. We've checked all the boxes on Ricky Pearsall." Really good tape too. There's like at least one moment in every game where he's just streaking wide open down the field off of some ridiculous move he threw at a defensive back at the line of scrimmage and just breezed right by him. So I like him a whole lot. I would not be surprised. I've read anywhere from second round to top of the third, but I wouldn't have an issue. I wouldn't have an issue if they took him in the second round, but I don't know. I think he's probably more likely to be a third round pick, and that would be a steal in my book.
I love that you mentioned the versatility inside and out, because I think it was a couple weeks ago at this point, I heard somebody talking about like the smaller guys in the second round, third round of this draft class at the receiver position. And they were like, yeah, you've got Roman Wilson and Ladd McConkey and Ricky Pearsall. And I'm like, what? Hold, pause. I think we've jumped the shark a little bit on lumping Ricky Pearsall into the slot only position to the point that people think he's not that big. Like, brother, 6'1", 195. That's a pretty flexible body type, and he's got the skill set to boot. I think, I don't know, he strikes me as the kind of guy that if he had played with a much better quarterback in college, he may be like a lock round 2 pick and be considered a unanimous like wide receiver 5, 6, 7 in this class, and not a guy that kind of falls off people's radars a little bit.
Yeah. And I like Roman Wilson too. And there was some buzz after Mobile that he was going to be a sneaky first round selection. It kind of feels like a lot of the buzz for him has cooled off quite a bit.
The size is just limiting. I think it's just,
and it's really hard. People talk about this issue with JJ McCarthy, how difficult it is to evaluate JJ McCarthy as a quarterback because of the offense that he played in. But the same thing can be said for these wide receivers, Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson as well. It's it's really difficult because you only have like a window of 3 to 4 plays where you can really see them let their hair down and just go for it and just play quarterback, just play receiver, that sort of thing. So it's a difficult eval. I wouldn't be surprised if teams were higher on Roman Wilson than we think. I also wouldn't be surprised to see him slide down into the third round as well.
I'm just sitting here making sure we only addressed the wide receiver position in the third round, but there are some other players. T'Vondre Sweat consistently listed as like a high third round pick. Obviously, I'm going to be kind of surprised if he's not a second round pick, just because he's got it's one of those guys where I don't think his projected number matches with what we've seen on tape and the hype that he's gotten in this offseason. He's a big boy who folks like every single team. I don't care what your defensive scheme is. You need a player like that in the middle of your defensive line. It's a universal thing. And so I think that he's somebody that could absolutely be in that range. There's some really talented. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say for him, I think his pass rush moves are a little underrated because it's kind of a strength thing for him. I don't think he's going to go out there and be throwing a rip move at anybody or anything like that. But I think his hands and his frame, he's so strong that he can generate a pass rush just from punching a shoulder and changing the angle of the offensive lineman and just scooting right through. It's pass rushing out of power more than technique, and maybe you can coach him up on the technique, but I think that's an element of his game that he's being a little underrated on. People just kind of say big body, moves fast, he's powerful, he can drive guys back, but I think there's some juice there with Sweat as well. I'd be happy with him at 38.
I would not be upset by that at all. Glory Day Sports here saying headline Easton Freeze, Anthony Richardson sucks and cost Ricky Pearsall. Yeah, I've turned on my wide receiver 1 from last year's, or quarterback 1 from last year's draft class. I hate Anthony Richardson. No, I was more referencing who he was playing with last year without Anthony Richardson.
The 23 tape.
Yeah, 100%. Some other players in the third round range that I want to mention: Cameron Kinchins out of Miami, safety. If Titans were to address the safety position, I think he's a good player. Kieran Amagaji, who we've talked a little bit about, Yale player, played tackle at the NFL level. I think he has guard tackle flexibility. Have you watched much Amagaji yet? What I've seen, I really like him. Okay, what do you think?
I just just watched him on Sunday, and I've got all my notes that I haven't typed up yet. But if they draft Karan Amagaji, I think I will become the Joker. I don't think he's good. I don't think
You
he's
don't
good.
you don't think he's good?
No, I don't.
That's crazy. I really like him.
So he's got the size, he's got the length,
Uh-huh.
he's got a lot of he's thickly built, and I think there are flashes of a good offensive tackle in there, but I think I had heard people say, and I try not to do this, but sometimes it's unavoidable because the Yale tape was, it's not like it's just out there on the streets for you to go get whenever you want it.
Very hard to find, yes.
So when you have a prospect like that, you kind of you can't avoid the narrative of people talking about him. And I'd heard people say, like, yeah, he looks like $1 million, but you watch his tape and he's not like dominating guys that are going to be like future accountants and lawyers and stuff like that in the Ivy League. And I'm not taking pot shots at the Ivy League or anything like that.
Do it. I don't care. I have no love lost for the Ivy League.
But I think if you're going to go out there at that level of competition and you're going to have a realistic shot of making it in the NFL, you've got to just murder dudes. And I didn't see him murder dudes a whole lot. So I view him, I shouldn't say he stinks because that's unfair.
You see him as more of a developmental
I think he's a guy that, a team that doesn't need immediate tackle help, but could stand to have one waiting in the wings within the next couple of seasons. He's a guy that you draft because of his frame and the traits that he has, and you hope that when the time comes, he can be ready for it. I think, a team like Kansas City that might be needing a tackle on down the road, that's the perfect landing spot for him where he can go and just kind of do his thing for a little bit. But I hark back to the Titans needing a guy right now, and I don't think he can be a guy right now.
I'll move on from that for now because we're going to have you back on for the offensive line top 10 lists.
I'll rein myself in.
We'll have words then on Karan Amagaji. Okay, let's get out of here in a minute. But first, I want to just throw out a couple of where the Titans actually do have a draft pick right now in the top of the 4th round. Who are some of your favorite early day 3 guys that are high on your list of targets for the Titans?
Yeah, I start with the tackles. I just said, sure. I'll rein myself in with the offensive line.
Everyone knows 4th round tackles are successful historically.
I love Christian Jones. There's some buzz that he might not be there in the 4th round anymore. Same with Roger Rosengarten. Rosengarten's like a hand fighter, man. Like he's really good with his hands, really athletic. I think he's kind of light. I think we saw that the Senior Bowl. He got driven back quite a bit. I think people, have flashbacks to the Michigan game, right? It's the national championship, the biggest stage, the game that most people, if you ask them, did you watch any Washington football this year? Yeah, I caught him in the national championship. And that was not his best game, but I don't think it's indicative of the tape there. I think he's a really good right tackle. And I don't know that he's going to be there on day 3 either. But right now, the mock drafts kind of have him in that range for 106, which is the pick that they'd have. I think Christian Jones is going to be a player in the NFL. I will be flipping my wig if they end up with Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu and Christian Jones. I'm gonna be like, let's clear our plans. Our plans for February. We're going to the Super Bowl, baby. It's back on. Outside of the offensive line, I do think that there is a defensive lineman out of Duke by the name of Dwayne Carter. That is just a beast, a menace. I like the idea of pairing him up with Jeffrey Simmons. And then some of the edge rushers that we've talked about, if they miss out on one of these elite guys from that group of like developmental quality guys, I really like Mo Camara out of Colorado State.
Okay. I've not watched any of him yet.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Got a pretty mean crossover to get inside and get to the quarterback. Pretty sudden, twitchy kind of guy. I like Javon Solomon a lot. One of the weirdest bodies I've ever scouted. He's like a short, compact edge rusher, but he has like super long arms, and he's just a barrel of energy, man. He's a lot of fun to watch as well. And the aforementioned Nelson Caesar. If I would also throw Austin Booker out of Kansas in the conversation as well, but I don't think that he'll be there in the 4th round.
I'll let that stand in terms of those positions. In terms of the receiver position, the number one guy for me, and I think for a lot of folks, I really like Malik Washington out of Virginia. Our buddy Teron Davenport, I was DMing with him 2 weeks ago, and he brought it up out of the blue. He's like, if you watch this Washington kid, and at first I'm like, which one? Because I'm pretty sure there are two of them, and there are Taj, right? Also a receiver in this class.
There is.
Malik is who I'm talking about.
Too.
Yeah, I think that they're both nice players, but Malik is who I in particular I am a big fan of out of Virginia. He's a baller, and I think he's also one of those guys I'd be kind of surprised if he's there in the 4th round, but somebody's got to fall, and I would not mind him at all at the receiver position. Because like after all this discussion, I am pretty firmly on I don't think they're going to address receiver in this class super high. I could be wrong, but if they don't, they're likely to do it here on day 3, and that could be a good option for them.
Yeah, I would throw in Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, and I am a massive fan of Luke McCaffrey. I have a huge draft crush on Luke McCaffrey.
Those are both guys that I hear just as much, if not more, dissent on McCaffrey and Thrash than I do positivity.
Yeah.
First of all, I rank them pretty strongly in that order of I prefer Thrash to McCaffrey, although I do like them both.
I've got McCaffrey pretty high on my list. I think he might be in my top 10 receivers.
Yeah, you're getting yourself in trouble, Stoney. You're just banking on those genes. I mean, I respect that. Just bank on the genetics and see what you can't go wrong, right?
There was a lot on the tape that I liked about McCaffrey, but you watch him against Conference USA defensive backs, and he doesn't really look that fast. But when they clocked him at 21 miles per hour at one point during the Senior Bowl, I'm like, okay, I'm good. We got the speed box checked. I'm good.
He was fast. You're right. I think I were sitting next to you when you pointed it out in Glee at the board. Look, McCaffrey, 22, whatever, 21.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was fun. We're gonna do a lot more of this, and like I said, we're gonna have you on for another
anytime.
Offensive line, Electric Boogaloo 2, but also 2 more episodes. So yeah, we do the top 10 series. If you're not familiar with the way that we handle the draft around here on the Hot Read Podcast, very soon we'll be getting to the top 10 players at each position group in this draft and going through them in length. Stoney, appreciate you, my man, for filling in for JT, who is traveling today. He'll be back with us on our Sunday show. Until then, for Stoney Keely at SoBros Network, who, first of all, by the way, let me slow my roll. Stoney, you're doing so much work. Tell folks what they need to go and consume from you. You got Film Friday coming up on Stacking the Inbox. Anything else?
There's a ton of draft content on Stacking the Inbox right now. $5 a month, man. It's like my life's work over there. My big board is I'm already up to like 50,000 words. I've written a novel.
Woo!
I got 206 prospects that are on it, and I've written about most of them on Stacking the Inbox. You've got scouting reports for the top of the class: Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt, Roma Dunze. I'm writing JC Latham as soon as we get off here. I've already got the video done, but there's a lot of work. I don't stop. No, I don't. And SoBros Network, hey, listen, I'm reviewing Yankee Candles. I'm reviewing restaurants.
The important stuff, right? Journalism.
Writing about wrestling. You know, there's all kinds of stuff there. I'm on the Unofficial Titans podcast, wherever you take in your shows. And man, I feel like I'm probably forgetting a million things, but that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, some big J journos spend their days getting kicked off of Vanderbilt campuses, and some are writing detailed reviews of Yankee Candles. They are one and the same of importance, but they provide the same value to society.
If I may, before we get out of here, I just want to mention Derek's comment from before, because I don't think I'm articulating my point about the vision for competing in 2024 versus later very well. But
okay.
Dallas Turner is 5th overall on my big board. I think he is the best defensive player in this class. I'm not saying he is a spare tire. I'm saying picking him over picking an offensive tackle.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Is taking the broken down car and putting a spare on it instead of fixing the problem right now. And
he is not the spare. It's a roster building conversation.
Yeah.
You've added a very good player at a position you don't need to be great now. That's all.
You know, I just don't want Derek thinking I'm a total idiot, for saying something like
right. I'm the idiot because I actually don't think that he's the potential defensive rookie of the year. I guess somebody has to be. I'm leaning Quinyon Mitchell. Give me Quinyon for defensive rookie of the year.
I like that. That's spicy.
Okay. All right, we'll be done here. Again, we'll be back with the Hot Read Podcast talking about something with the draft. We'll figure it out before then. On Sunday evening, enjoy March Madness currently going on, I believe. I have to check. I forgot. It's Thursday, right? March. Yeah. Not a basketball guy. Okay.
No, I haven't.
Well, the rest of us have brackets to bust, so we'll check in on those and enjoy your weekend of March Madness if that's your thing. If not, I'm going to see Dune 2 for the first time tomorrow. So I'm sure you've seen this, right?
No, not yet. I keep saying
Oh,
I
okay.
want to rewatch the first one before I go see the second one.
That's me. And then my friend is back in town for one day, and he got the tickets for us. And so now I'm on the clock. So I'm about to get off and watch Dune 1 against my will, and then watch Dune 2 because I want to tomorrow. Yeah, because
every
you
time
can't not.
every time I want to fire it up, I'm like, nah, I got to watch this McKinley Jackson tape instead.
And that's what makes you and me different, right there, my friend. You're an animal. So
thank
you, Stoney. Thank you, Stoney. Thank you, producer JT, for the work he's going to do on this behind the scenes. Until Sunday, for Stoney, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. It's been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you then.